Now let's go to New York, where the Giants close out their preseason campaign undefeated, beating the Bills, Jets, and routing the Patriots last night 42-10. That was fun. Jackson Dart has shined throughout the preseason, going 32 for 47 with 372 yards, 4 total touchdowns, and 0 interceptions.
That's my quarterback.
That's my quarterback. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders will return to the field tomorrow as the Browns face the Rams in their preseason finale. Now, after a promising outing in Game 1 versus the Panthers, Shedeur was sidelined for Game 2 due to an oblique injury. In one game, though, Shedeur went 14 for 23 with 138 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, Canty, I heard you say Jackson Dart's your quarterback, but who will start more games this season, Shedeur or Dart?
I'm going to go with Shedeur Sanders because the New York Giants, from an organizational standpoint, seem committed to making sure that Jackson Dart gets a lot of seasoning before they put him into regular season action. They went out and they signed Russell Wilson as their quarterback, and they signed Jameis Winston. You don't have those two veterans in your quarterback room unless you are intent on letting Jackson Dart sit and learn in the early going to the regular season, especially when you're playing when you're playing the number one strength of schedule in the National Football. There will be a little bit of time before we see Jackson Dart inserted as the full-time starter. Conversely, with the Cleveland Browns, they have no incentive to roll with Joe Flacco playing the majority of the games this upcoming season. The only purpose for the Cleveland Browns this season, the only thing that they can get that's constructive for their franchise moving forward, is to figure out what they have in those 2 draft picks at quarterback, Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. And based on what we've seen in the first couple of preseason games, I would say that Shedeur Sanders will ultimately be the guy first off the bench to have an opportunity to prove that he can be the guy.
I think you're wrong. I think you're dead wrong. I think you're dead wrong. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, Shedeur Sanders, as good as he's looked, Jackson Dart has looked pretty damn impressive. Number 2, Russell Wilson has not. Okay? Not bad or anything like that, but has not. Number 3, Jameis Winston ain't playing to get ahead of Jackson Dart. That ain't going to happen. They ain't going to play Jameis Winston to get ahead of Jackson Dart. They're just not. Number 4, Brian Dable's job is on the line. Fair or unfair, I think the man's a hell of a coach, me personally. Even though shame, that's what I call the GM, because he should be ashamed of himself how he treated Saquon Barkley. The bottom line is that's why I call him shame. That's exactly what I call him. But I'm not going to deny that he hasn't done a good. I'm not going to deny that he's done a good job in the draft. Yeah. So we get that. Yes. But people have looked at them and they've said, you know what? There's some trepidation there about their job security, both of them. And in the case of Dable, more so. I don't think that's fair. I think the man has proven he can coach. I think he can coach his tail off. And I think he just knows that he needs a quarterback out there, and he doesn't have time to wait. He's not a 2-time coach of the year like Kevin Stefanski. He's not a guy, he doesn't have a guy on Russell Wilson that is Joe Flacco that just took the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs a couple of years ago when Deshaun Watson went down, and he got off the couch and took them to the damn postseason. I'm not saying that Shedeur Sanders is not going to be in there. Don't get me wrong. I'm simply saying that I think we're going to see Jackson Dart sooner than later before we see Shedeur Sanders barring injury. That's what I believe.
Agree with Dart because it's going to take some time to get him out there because they're going to season him, but then they want to turn the keys over to him. First round pick. A lot's invested in him. They want to get this thing going. And to be honest, it's kind of like with children. You want them out there. You want them exploring. You want them trying things. You want to learn and go through trial and error, toughen up the skin, fortify, and get through it. Like the Giants aren't going anywhere anyway this season. So get him out there at some point. Let him build up. The Sanders thing is fascinating because with Cleveland, you talked about how their goal is to figure out what they have in those 2 QBs.
No doubt.
I think that's part of the goal. I also look at next year's quarterback class with Nussmeier, with Cade Klubnik, potentially with Arch Manning. I look at Cleveland with 2 first-round picks, and I look at the 2 young QBs on the Cleveland roster, neither of which is a first-round pick. And I think to myself, maybe we're trying something with these guys, but is the goal to lose as many games as possible so we get into a position for one of these quarterbacks? I don't trust what's going on with Cleveland. That's why I don't go with Shedeur. Even if he plays really well, I still don't trust the situation.
So here's what's
I don't trust what's going on with Cleveland. I mean, that's an evergreen statement based on what we've seen the last quarter century.
Well, here's what's going on with Cleveland.
Longer.
Steven mentioned Flacco. Flacco took them to the playoffs a couple years ago. They did not re-sign Flacco. They had Jameis Winston there. They bring back Flacco. They also have a Kenny Pickett, who they signed earlier in free agency. Kevin Stefanski likes veterans. Kevin Stefanski likes guys who will run exactly what he's asking you to run. It is about timing, it's about rhythm, it's about accuracy, it's do the job. I agree with you that their position right now should be, hey, we got these two young kids. Let's see. Stefanski and their GM, Andrew Berry, sign extensions. They should not be on the hot seat. So you can say, well, let's just see what we have before we turn to the draft. But it is shaping up based off of how they've divvied up the reps in training camp. The fact that Shedeur started, then got hurt, and he's going to be behind Dillon Gabriel and Flacco. I think he's still going to be fourth. So when you talk about who's going to get to start more games, it would not shock me if Dillon Gabriel, if you took Kenny Pickett out the picture, it wouldn't shock me if Dillon Gabriel was the backup before Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't know that Kenny Pickett is going to start the season on the active roster because we haven't seen him in the preseason.
That's right.
He's not going to play on Saturday against the LA Rams, so there's that. I do think the number 2 quarterback job is up for grabs. Who the backup quarterback is to start the regular season feels like that's an open competition, and that's going to play itself out. Joe Flacco's going to start the 3rd preseason game, which is a little bit different. But then it's going to be Dillon Gabriel, then Shedeur Sanders. We'll see what ends up happening. But if what we saw against the Carolina Panthers was a prelude to what Shedeur Sanders is going to look like on Saturday, I will tell you this. He will make a compelling argument to be the guy first off the bench when Joe Flacco ultimately gets the hook. And make no mistake about it, as much as Kevin Stefanski may like veteran players, we know what Joe Flacco is. We know what he ain't. I guarantee that Joe Flacco ain't going to start 17 regular season games this year.
Well, we know that.
The Cleveland Browns are going to give these young quarterbacks an opportunity, a chance to play this season.
Hold up. Is Russell Wilson going to start 17 games this year?
No.
Of course not. Exactly. That's my point.
But Kmart was making the case that Kevin Stefanski, because he loves veteran quarterbacks, is going to play Joe Flacco.
No 17 games, but we know that Russell Wilson.
Joe Flacco ain't going to make it through the first 6 games. You see they schedule?
Okay.
It ain't going to happen.
Right, well,
they got the Cincinnati Bengals and 5 playoff teams to go.
Russell Wilson ain't going to start 17 games, and Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston combined ain't going to start 17 games.
I will say this. The Russell Wilson has a chance to be more competitive with that defense that the New York Giants are bringing to the party than the Cleveland Browns do through the first third of the season. They just do. The Giants' defense is underrated in terms of how good they're going to be.
That's true.
And they are going to be in a lot of closely contested ball games. And what the product looks like on the field is going to dictate when Brian Daboll decides he's going to yank Russell Wilson out of the starting lineup. Conversely, the Cleveland Browns' defense is supposed to be their strength. JOK is not going to be there the entire season. MJ Emerson got hurt in training camp. He's going to be out for a while. That defense is not as solid as we thought it would be coming into this season. And they don't have a glut of playmakers on the offensive side of the ball either. So there are a hell of a lot of questions in Cleveland. And even Joe Flacco being a veteran is not going to lead to a winning product, which opens the door for Shedeur Sanders to play sooner rather than later.
I just can't get past.
I have to get past what you're about to say. I'm so sorry.